Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to yet another Halal food podcast. Today, we are very fortunate to have a scholar with us who will take us through an important topic that appeals to both Muslims and non-Muslims alike. I'm very pleased to introduce or to welcome Mufti Amjad. I'm going to hand over to him to introduce himself before we start the podcast.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Awal, for inviting me onto the podcast. Short introduction. Okay, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. As I was saying, you can see
we want to see the main points.
The main points. Okay.
Yeah.
So my first area where I worked in and when I developed both some formative education as well as experiences in the natural sciences. I have a degree in applied chemistry. So I've worked for 13, 14 years as a research chemist. I have, fortunately, a number of patents under the belt as well. And I developed numerous products. I won't bore you with the type of chemistry, free radical polymerization, polyacrylamides, things of that nature. But anyway, I spent quite a significant amount of time in that part of the world. And that was a very keen area for me because in essence, it developed my understanding of empirical science and about how you measure things, how you assess things, and the scientific way. So that was a key part of my education. I then moved into teaching. So I have a teaching qualification. I've been responsible for setting up numerous education establishments, both from sort of nursery, primary school, all the way up to university, where I set up a department at a local university, and also was involved with setting up a department in the Netherlands as part of another university. As a consequence, I also then did my higher education teaching qualification as well. And I did an MPhil, and the MPhil was on Muslims in non-Muslim lands, which was looking specifically at how Muslims continue to maintain their faith, but now in lands which may be liberal democracies and things of that nature. And how does that all work? So I spent a great deal amount of time there. So I covered my sort of social sciences degree as well in that area. And obviously, as my title suggests, I have had learning as a Mufti. Prior to that, I've studied the full Alamiya course. I've studied Ifta twice, once in a class setting and once on a one-to-one basis over a 4 or 5 year period. And also I've qualified as a Qāḍī, which is a judgeship, which is very rare. Not many people go on to study that. And that means, for example, here in the UK, I play a role within Wifaqul Ulama as being responsible for declaring the start of a new month, and also in terms of this prayer times and setting things like, for example, Zakatul Fitr and things which of that sort of nature. More recently, I've been instrumental in setting up and finding the RG group, which is trying to bring Sharia now to the business world. So we're looking at sort of international trade, and we're also looking at Sharia compliant methodology, both in terms of policies and also in terms of practices. So that was, in a nutshell, a long life that I've led so far.
Thank you very much, Mufti Amjad. You've mentioned two things that caught my eye. So the first, caught my attention. The first one is that you did applied chemistry. It's very rare to come across a scholar or a person who has got knowledge in both conventional education and also in the religious scriptures. Why did you decide to take that route?
For me, as a child, I've always been interested in understanding things. I think as far back as I can remember, even in school, there was always this interest and engagement. Unfortunately, for many of us, people of color, we always get shown kind of, the leaders of science were white people, whether it was Louis Pasteur, Marie Curie, Albert Einstein. So we always grew up with this, where were the brown people? Where were the colored people when all these inventions were ongoing? But that didn't deter me. That didn't stop me as a rule. And therefore, science was always something that I would eventually get into. So as soon as I left school at 16, I took up a role as a laboratory technician at a local chemical company. And therefore, I conducted my formal education alongside working as well, because I've always been keen to apply what I learn. I'm not much of a theorist. I don't mind theory, but I'm very practically applied. And similarly, when it comes to the religious studies, it's not just the theoretical understanding of it, but how does that apply to us in the context we find ourselves in? So yeah, absolutely. It is a rare mix, shall we say, to have both that natural sciences, so to speak, and also then the Islamic sciences. But as I mentioned as well, I went further to study social sciences. So trying to understand people and groups of people, and how do people work, and especially with from a Muslim perspective, but generally speaking as well. So I feel, the fact that I've had this formal education and these experiences has meant that I can give a more balanced and nuanced and pragmatic responses to many day-to-day events which affects us in Muslims. And now we're living in a completely new world in terms of the speed of the way things are done, and the amount of consummation of food and things of that matter.
Yeah. You see, you and I have got some things in common. I did chemistry. I did both physical and organic chemistry in secondary school and also in university, in the early years of university. And it's not surprising that I came across a paper that was reviewed by you on stunning, poultry stunning, and also small ruminant and sheep stunning. I was a little bit surprised when I saw it. I was like, how come this scholar, before I met you, that was before I met you, how come this scholar has got an understanding about what happens in slaughter? So for those of my listeners and viewers who haven't seen the paper, I will really encourage you to have a look at the review by Mufti Amjad. So thank you for that. The other thing you mentioned, which I'll take with you offline, is international trade. As you know, I am involved in international trade development for UK products. So I'll touch base with you later on that. So let's go to today's topic now then, animal welfare. There is a lot of reports of Muslims abusing animals, people criticizing halal slaughter for being barbaric. Do you think the religion calls for us to be to behave badly towards animals, or is just a human thing? What is the stance of Islam when it comes to animal welfare?
I think at first we need to just get the context that from an Islamic perspective, Muslims believe that mankind is the best of creation. So this is important. And God has placed man in the center of creation, and he has made him a Khalifa. A Khalifa means a steward of the earth. So not only does he have a responsibility to the earth as a steward, as a representative of God on earth, but also the earth has been made for his benefit in order to pursue and reach the best physical and spiritual state that he or she can reach. So I think it's important that we set the sort of stall out there in terms of understanding what it is the earth is around us. So are we allowed to abuse the earth? Are we allowed to abuse the animals that Allah has created for us? Absolutely, clearly from the way I've posited that's absolutely impermissible. Reason being is that they also have their own communities. The Quran mentions as well that the birds have their own communities, the insects have their own communities, the animals have their own communities. So therefore, we may benefit from them, absolutely, like we can benefit from the trees, like we can benefit from the rivers, like we can benefit from the animals, whether for consumption, companionship, or for transportation purposes. However, we cannot abuse them. And that's the same with everything, even as humans, can we utilize manpower? Of course, we need laborers for certain type of work. Can we abuse those laborers? Absolutely not. So we don't take a black and white approach to things. We know there's a reality. The earth has to go around, the world has to work. However, there is kind of morals and ethics which come within the legal code to ensure that this doesn't go to dhulm. And as we know, dhulm, oppression, is the worst type of sin.
Thank you very much, Mufti Amjad. Look, you've mentioned something again, the fact that humans are Khalifa. We've been put in charge of the animal of the environment to protect it. Now, although we're discussing animal welfare, that brings in another element: environmental sustainability. What does Islam say about environmental sustainability? Can we fell trees? Can we destroy natural bodies, water, the soil? What does Islam say about sustainability?
I think, unfortunately, as Muslims, we're not very good ambassadors of our faith, because we've dropped the ball on that one as well. Because when climate change and climate responsibility started to become headline news, probably last sort of 10, 15 years, arguably speaking, we should have been, banging the tables 1400 years ago, because we were informed about maintaining, even the Prophet ﷺ mentions that when you're making wudu, that only use that amount of wudu you need. And if somebody mentions, yes, but what if I'm making it near a river? It says, absolutely, even if you're making it near a river. So therefore, we can see clearly that we've been given this responsibility in order to ensure that our rivers and seas are not polluted, because as I mentioned earlier, there are other communities, like the communities of fish. We're seeing now, obviously, that plastics that have ended up being in the seas are now making it their way back into our food chain, because of fish consuming extremely small particles, and then we are consuming them. So we're only going to become, concerned when it affects us, and that's only because greed has set in, where we have now fishing quotas. We shouldn't really need fishing quotas, because why are we fishing the seas to absolute, empty? So this is greed. This is where, unfettered consumerism comes in, and where people just are hell-bent on squeezing the living daylights out of this earth, where there's going to be nothing left. So we have a responsibility, and as Muslims, we have a responsibility with our fellow humans to be raising that point and arguing that point. But like I said at the outset, is unfortunately we kind of dropped the ball on that one, and we're sort of catching up when really we should have been global leaders when it came to stewardship of the earth.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope policymakers are listening to us. You've just emphasized the fact that, look, these rules were handed down to the Prophet, peace be upon him, 1400 years ago. Muslims are supposed to obey by that, and Muslims should be raising the flag before conventional rules came into practice. Sustainability is a relatively new thing if you compare to what the religion has been saying since then. What do you think Islamic scholars can do you think Islamic scholars can play a role in informing policy, in getting engaged in government discussions on policies about sustainability? What can you guys bring on board to the mainstream?
I think so. I think there's a voice that needs to be heard from all circles and all spheres of society and the community. And this is a voice of faith. So there should be the voice of the faithful, those people who take their guidance and take their morals from a revealed text that they believe is from God. And therefore, absolutely, I think it's a voice that needs to be heard, because as hopefully what I've shared with you so far is of a positive nature. It's a one of which supports this sustainability, which supports and ensuring that the earth is there for the generation which comes after us. Because as we know, we're not the only generation here. We know that there will be generations that will come after, and we need to ensure the sustainability of this so that more and more people can continue to live and experience life in a peaceful way and experience life in a productive way, so they can maximize their lives and get the best out of those lives. So therefore they can give more time and concentration to the next life and feel that this is what we're leading to. So yeah, absolutely. I think that voice is an important voice that is heard, because it's an influential voice as well, because we know the Muslim community look up to Islamic scholars and they see Islamic scholars as their leaders in the religious sphere, maybe not in the sort of from member of the parliament or in that perspective, but from a religious perspective, where many people are consider themselves to be Muslims and sort of consider their religion to play a key part in their decision making, then yes, Islamic scholars have an important role to play.
Yeah, thank you very much. So now, what I want us to do is you emphasize the fact that animal welfare is important, environmental sustainability is important. There is a hadith I've come across by Imam Nawawi where it is emphasized that verily Allah has prescribed ihsan. Ihsan is doing something to the best manner, excellence in whatever you do. So verily Allah has prescribed ihsan. So if you are killing, kill in the best manner. If you are slaughtering, slaughter in the best manner. The latter part of the hadith says, each and every one of you must sharpen their blade before slaughter in order to spare animals suffering. Mashallah, this was revealed 1400 years ago, or this was reported 1400 years ago. At that time, there was no conventional rules, so nobody really knew anything about welfare. Nobody knew that you needed a sharp knife to slaughter an animal. I just want us to digest it. What is that concept of ihsan in Islam? where we are asked that if we are killing, we kill well, slaughtering, we slaughter well. Can you just take your time to explain the concept of ihsan in Islam?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's again, build a framework in order to give a fully fleshed out answer. Now, this is the time when people owned things, and when they owned things, they were absolute kings over those things. So when the Prophet ﷺ was speaking about rights, and he started to speak about rights of the women, rights of children, rights of, obviously slavery was existent at that time, rights of slaves, rights of the neighbor, the reaction from the people was, and this tells you what the kind of culture was at the time, was, what is this man saying? He's giving rights to animals. What is this? So the reason why I'm mentioning this is it's important to understand the context of how the Prophet was speaking. It's easy now for us to speak about, animal rights, rights of minorities, rights of children, rights of anti-slavery and all the rest of it that goes on. But this is because now there's at least a drive. There's at least some kind of support. When the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this, at that time, there was no support. Why is this man telling us that we shouldn't sit on our camels for too long when we're having a conversation, that we should dismount our camels? Why is this man saying that we should make sure that our camels are fed and looked after? Why is he telling us? Why is he telling us that we should not be branding our donkeys and camels on the face and causing them harm? Who is he? These are our animals. We own them. But you can see from his nature, alayhi salatu wasalam, that is continuously encouraging and enjoining. At that time, obviously, he was only preaching to people about looking after animals and ensuring that these animals were well looked after. The hadith you mentioned, where the Prophet ﷺ mentions that Allah has kataba al-ihsan ala kulli shay, that he has enjoined and made compulsory this term ihsan upon everything. And then he goes on to mention slaughter from the hadith Jibril, a very famous hadith that many know, when Gabriel comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and he starts asking him questions. And the first thing he asks him is, what is Islam? And then the next thing he asks him is, what is Iman? The third thing he asks him is, what is ihsan? And when he asks him what is ihsan, the Prophet ﷺ replies that you worship Allah as though he sees you. And if that you cannot get to that kind of mental state, then know that he sees you. Meaning, be God conscious in everything that you do. Know that there is an accountability for everything that you do. So now when we sort of take it to the hadith itself, so we're talking about now, I guess we live in a different world now with the slaughtering rates that we have to slaughter poultry at, and the rates we have to slaughter lambs at. But this was a time when a man could take an animal to one side carefully, considerately, not be harsh with that animal, gently lay that animal down and ensure that the animal was not getting slaughtered in front of other animals, because there's an understanding that animals get scared. So this was again an appreciation of the impact, not only on the animal that you're slaughtering, but also on the other animals that are potentially watching. And remember, this was a time when, we're only now understanding how animals are aware of their surroundings, how they're aware of their masters, how they can sense things, understand things. The Prophet ﷺ was telling us this 1400 years ago, that don't do this, don't slaughter an animal in front of other animals, because it will disturb them, it will perturb them. Rather, move the animal to one side, out of vision. As I said, we live in different times now with the rates that we need our poultry and our lamb and sheep, but those were times when this was possible. That move them to one side and ensure that you're prepared. The knife is obviously concealed, it's exceptionally sharp. Why is it exceptionally sharp? So that when you do make the cut is done in such a way that it causes minimum damage to the animal. Now, people might say, oh, well, why eat animals at all? Let's just abandon the consumption of animals. Well, at the outset, I set that sort of framework to say that from a Muslim's perspective, the earth was created for humans, and everything that was within the earth has been created for humans. So we would have to change our whole theology. We would have to change our whole kind of mindset in order to start saying, okay, let's just say that certain animals haven't really been created for us, but they've been created for another purpose altogether. And that really, means we're having to go back to kind of square one. So in that regard, those animals are there. we need to consume them. We get certain food from certain energy, certain nutrients, certain minerals from animals that are important. And also we understand when it comes to Eid al-Adha, that when we slaughter an animal and we give the animal in the path of Allah, we share it in such a way that we give to the poor and we give to the needy as well.
Mashallah.
So therefore, this both preparation before the slaughter, and obviously we understand, and we have been explained, I know there's research that's been done which sort of challenges certain understandings, is that when the slaughter takes place, immediately after that, the pain or the animal is feeling is no longer there. This is involuntary reaction to obviously the blood which is being pumped out of the animal. And that's the key part there. Some people say, why is this? What is the reason for the slaughter? Why can't it be done with other means? The reason for the slaughter is that blood has been made impermissible for the consumption for Muslims. And the way in which an animal is going to be close to making sure that all the blood has left its body is in the manner when it is slaughtered. So that's the rationale before someone says, oh, why do we need that in the first place?
Yeah.
That is the rationale for it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mufti. Now, you mentioned another important point, the fact that at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, animals would have been slaughtered in the calmest of way. Thousands of animals wouldn't have been slaughtered at the same time. So maybe one animal at a time, or maybe two, but they wouldn't have been allowed to see each other being slaughtered. In modern day slaughter, we've got some abattoirs, some poultry abattoirs can slaughter up to 15,000 birds an hour. 15,000 birds an hour. That is a clear deviation, not violation, but deviation from what used to happen at the time of the Prophet. Do you think because we have deviated from the practice at the time, have we violated the rules? So deviation from the norm, which was slaughtering one at a time, has that led to a violation of the halal rules?
Yeah, this, I guess, is the old chicken and egg part of the pot. But this is the supply demand, I guess. What came first? Were there more chicken products available to consumers, and then that's where the demand came from? Or was there always a demand for chicken and the people are just kind of keeping up with it? To me, I think it's more the latter. I think, I've been around for quite a while, and we weren't slaughtering these kind of rates 30, 40 years ago. We are doing that now. And that's, the fact that we have so many different food outlets now, whether they're fast food, whether they're restaurants, and the way things can be cooked in so many different ways now. There's an appetite, both literally and metaphorically, figuratively being built. So there, and therefore you're getting this rate of thousands of, chicken. When I hear these numbers, my mind explodes. Do you think, how many there is? So that's absolutely correct. However we've got here, let's just say we've got here now, then it's going to be very difficult now to maintain those same level of etiquettes that we were instructed by the Prophet ﷺ in this. Basically, it's like a factory, isn't it? It's mass commercialization of poultry, and it's a mass manufacturing in a way of poultry. We've put everything onto mass manufacture because we have these insatiable appetites that need meeting. So that's right. I agree that we are in different times, and therefore we need to take the principles, taking into some kind of pragmatic steps as well, but take the principles and try to find a best fit.
Thank you very much, Mufti Amjad. So I'm going to ask a question that is very similar. I read a book that was written by the first Imam of Woking Mosque. And Woking Mosque is one of I think it's the first mosque that was built in the UK, a purpose-built mosque in the UK. And it's written by the Imam at the time, Bashir Ahmed Masri, and the title is Animal Welfare in Islam. I believe somewhere in the book he argues that some Muslims have taken to vegetarianism to abstain from eating meat with the hope that they are protecting animal welfare. I don't think vegetarianism is compulsory in Islam. What's your take on that? Can Muslims say, okay, I want to protect animal welfare, so I want to avoid meat? Does that violate any of the rules of Islam, or is it okay to be vegetarian? Or is it if you are vegetarian for any reason but for welfare reason, is it bad? Because look, the Prophet, peace be upon him, ate meat. So if you are challenging that, is it a good thing? Or I want you to explain that for us.
Yeah,
Vegetarianism.
I like the way you've laid that out, because you've touched upon so many of the points which were swimming in my head as you were saying them. The first thing is, when we say that we are abandoning meat, so let me just add some legal terms to it.
Okay.
So in essence, can somebody make meat impermissible to them?
Good.
That this is, and I'm going to use an Arabic term here, that this is haram for me, that this is illegal for me. Can somebody do that? So this is again from a legal perspective now. So from a legal perspective, one cannot make something impermissible upon themselves that has been made permissible to them, because one is not the shari. Shari means legislator, in our understanding, Allah and his prophet, and then by extension, by reasoning which is based on scripture and ijma, consensus. These are the really sources of our laws, and we cannot determine and say, oh, in my opinion, the method of slaughter is not taking into consideration the welfare of the animal. Therefore, based on that, I'm going to make this happen. One cannot do that, because whenever a Muslim, and this is again going back to a Muslim, as a person who defines themselves as a Muslim, identifies themselves as a Muslim, cannot consider something which Allah, God, made permissible as impermissible, based on saying that it's the welfare of the animal is not being considered. Can one choose to be a vegetarian for whatever reason? They've got gout, or they put on weight, or the doctor said, look, you got to stay away from red meat, it's not good for you, or whatever. Then there's nothing wrong in that. Of course, there's many times where, those of us who are diabetic, we have to avoid certain type of foods, and other reasons where we have to avoid certain type of foods. We are only doing that because of this necessity, because of this issue that's come up. We're not doing that out of a choice based on a decision that we're making as to whether we consider something to be good for the animal or bad for the animal. And that's why it's important to understand. But a personal choice is a personal choice, absolutely. The only thing I would add to that is that our diet is very meat rich. Our diet is very poultry rich. So we do find that when the Prophet ﷺ did used to eat meat, was it on a daily basis? Was it on? It wasn't. And I think that's the issue. We won't go without a day if there was no meat or poultry on the menu. If we didn't get it for lunch, we'd be sort of looking at it for the evening supper. Otherwise, people would be up in arms if you're going to be serving broccoli or potatoes twice a day. So we've kind of got a palate for it now, and we do desire it, but I think there needs to be a little bit of a balance. Unless you're obviously going to the gym and you're trying to keep your proteins up, I guess that's a different thing.
Yeah. That is, I really love the way you've explained it. At least I'm sure for the benefit of the Muslim Ummah, people will get to understand the differences. Whether you decide on a personal note to move away from it for personal reasons, but you cannot criticize the consumption that it is not consistent with Islamic law. So I'm really happy.
That's absolutely clear, and it's a danger that once we start being sort of moral policing the Sharia, or moral policing the law which has been handed to us for 1400 years, that becomes a problem. Because in essence, what we're saying, maybe subconsciously, is that I understand this better than Allah understood it, or I understand this better than the way the Prophet understood it. And that is very dangerous from a theological perspective, if a person wants to continue to identify themselves as a Muslim and continue to say that, this is my faith, because it will start to be at loggerheads with their faith.
Yeah. Thank you very much. In the same book by Imam Masri, I read again that in pre-Islamic Arabia, that is before the introduction of Islam into Arabia, the Arabs used to cut the parts of live animals. So an animal which is still alive, they'll cut part of it and cook it, eat it, and it was considered a delicacy at the time, pre-Islamic Arabia. But when the Prophet, peace be upon him, came and started preaching, he said, look, anybody who cut part of it and consume it, that is a carrion, that is dead, that is haram. That is very important. It's very powerful that something that was part of the culture, the Prophet came and realized that, look, this is bad for the welfare of the animal. Do you have a comment on that? I just find it fascinating, and it's of benefit to,
Absolutely. He took a very direct approach, and these are the times when they were a persecuted minority as well. So
Yes.
it is quite challenging circumstances in which he spoke about the welfare of animals and ensuring that those animals were protected. Absolutely. He made it quite clear. He made a legal structure around it which forbade it, and he made sure that those animals, obviously this was the only method in which it was permissible, was in this route that was taken. So any measure, whether it was feeding the animal, where the animal was looked after, sitting unnecessarily at great length on the animal, not allowing the animal to take shade. So many comments that he made with regards to and we've particularly talked about animals that were of either for consumption purposes and for transportation purposes. But even we know he took a kindness to animals that were allowed, to move around freely. We know, for example, in the very early days, even dogs would freely roam through the Masjid Nabawi. So there was a very kind of a distanced approach with animals, and ensuring that those communities, for example, I think one companion took some chicks away from a bird, and the bird became very alarmed. So the Prophet instructed him to return the chicks back to the bird. A snake, which we know is dangerous, made its way into the room, and when it's made its way into the room, some companions tried their very best to try to kill it, but it disappeared. So the Prophet says that he escaped, you escaped from his evil, and he escaped from your evil. So he described it equally, that what you were inflicting upon it was wrong, but it was only permitted out of necessity, because you were going to save yourself, because that snake could potentially hide in a corner, and when someone was asleep, it could bite them. So it's only that. And we know, in Ihram, when we go for Hajj or Umrah, we're not allowed to affect any animal, not touch any animal or plant, in fact. So when you're in this heightened state of spirituality for a number of days, whether it's in the days of Hajj for the 5-6 days, or whether you go for Umrah for a number of days, you cannot even uproot a plant or kill any animal. Only those animals which are considered to be attacking you, whether it's a scorpion, a wasp, or anything that's actually attacking you, a rabid dog, for example, then you can defend yourself. But if it's not, you just let it go. So you can see in all levels the kindness and the compassion that the Prophet ﷺ, but as we said, pragmatic and practical as well. That yes, humans consume animals, humans consume poultry. So therefore, we should not let this go to an extreme and say, okay, if you want to really extend this compassion and kindness, we shouldn't eat them whatsoever. But that wasn't the case. We see, for example, animals in zoos that started maybe 100 years or so ago. This was, nothing that that used to take place within sort of Muslim cultures, because to entrap an animal and trap it in outside of its normal settings is not appropriate.
Mashallah, mashallah. I've got one more question. We've just got some 5 minutes to go. And it's a comment I made earlier, that I saw two papers that were reviewed by you on stunning. I was very impressed with the arguments you put forward in those papers. But my question to you, look, stunning will never go away. It will always be part of the halal sector. If an animal is stunned and the animal dies as a result of the stun before it's bled, there are some methods like that I know that some Muslims accept. Do you think it's acceptable? And on the other hand, if the stun is just to induce unconsciousness without killing the animal, are we allowed to consume such meats? 5 minutes.
So the first point was what about if an animal is killed by the method of stunning? Then that would not be considered as halal. That would be maita, which is termed as carrion, and would be impermissible for a Muslim to consume. That would be no different than somebody hitting an animal over the head with a club and killing it, and then quickly grabbing a knife and slaughtering. It would make no impact whatsoever. It is the cause of death which is making it halal. That's the essential part there. Now, I accept pragmatically as well, that we live in times where the consumption is so high. So would I accept a method of stunning if it could be scientifically proven that that animal is still alive? Absolutely. if you're probably aware, Dr. Awal, of the work I did on water bath stunning. And the problem with water bath stunning is there's so much variability in the water, in the fat content of the birds, in the shackles of how good a connection there is between the bird's leg and the shackles. There's so many variables, which means you cannot predict the level of charge, the current charge which is going through each bird, which means it will vary for each bird, which means that some birds will actually be just knocked out, just unconscious, whereas some birds will actually be killed. And there's actual work that's outside of the religious circles, within the work of scientists and those who work with abattoirs, that has proven that. And that was the paper that I wrote a few years back, which proves that. So therefore, if we can, a research project is conducted and it can be scientifically proven that those animals are still alive, then absolutely, that is something that can be supported. Yes, it goes against the etiquettes of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he's said, there's no need to stun an animal, but we also need to be pragmatic. We live in different times. Our consumption is exceptionally high. You mentioned 12,500 birds an hour. That's a massive number. So therefore, to be able to do that without stunning may prove difficult. But like I say may prove difficult because it needs to be scientifically verified. It's okay making comments until it is scientifically verified.
Correct. Look, stunning is a big thing. We could talk about it the whole day, so I'm not gonna dwell too much on that. But if somebody's listening, so somebody's in government or from competent authority or somebody from any part of the world, I've got audience in the Middle East and other parts. Are you open to discussing things with people? So giving consultancy, giving advice to people? If yes, how can people reach you? What is the best way to reach you? If you can read out your email, if you're happy to do that, because this will be audio and video so that people can clearly understand what do you mean. So are you open to work with people? If yes, what's your contact?
So I have in the past worked with organizations, and I'm not shying away from working with organizations. So we're more than happy, as I mentioned right at the outset, it's something that we're doing right now through the RG group, and therefore we're more than happy to do that, whether it's local, as in UK, or even outside of the UK. We're working with somebody in Malaysia right now, and also in Thailand. So this is the type of work that we will do, and we will engage with, and we can offer that kind of support and consultancy. It's not a problem. I'm trying to remember my email. I think it's mufti@rggroup.org.uk possibly, but you might need to check that one because I don't know the ending. But it is Mufti@RG Group. I know that part. Let me just check.
Let me quickly. Sorry, I'll put you on the spot there.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah. Also, it's important to mention that you did support the organization I work for, AHDB, in producing a Qurbani video and also a document, so people can actually go onto YouTube. If they search Qurbani, UK Qurbani or something, they will find a video where you contributed to it.
Absolutely. I found the email now. It's Mufti, MUFTI@rggroup.org.uk. But it would be easy even if they were to Google my name, Mufti Amjad Mohammed, and inshallah, I'm sure they'll find lots of material that I've done over the years, and there will be some contacts. But I think that's the easy contact that they can have. Okay. Otherwise, worst case, they can reach out to you. You have my private number, Dr. Wal. You are inshallah one of the fortunate ones.
Yeah. I've got only a few seconds. I know you also work for Olive Foundation. Can you just quickly explain what that involves?
So Olive Foundation, we primarily look at doing work of mainly carrying on from my thesis, which was Muslims in non-Muslim lands, is trying to find solutions for Muslims in the modern world. Because even though it's particularly for minorities, I'm finding obviously even in majority countries, in the Middle East, in Asia, everyone's trying to grapple, Muslim communities are trying to grapple with modernity or post-modernity, and trying to understand is how do we stay as Muslims in this completely new landscape, in this new world where it's a global community. We're working with so many different people of faiths and no faiths, and in fact faith is kind of dying now. In the most recent census we saw that Christianity for the first time was below 50%. So we're now living in a world where faith is disappearing, and Islam might be one of the only voices for faith left. So how do we now kind of navigate in this? So this is my main work. This is what I tend to do in all areas, whether it's financial, food, culture, and we're trying to give answers to that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mufti Amjad. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks for honoring my invitation. Inshallah, maybe next time we'll catch up again.
Perfect. Jazakallah khair. Salam.
Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.